Welcome back, everybody, to Dead Air. I'm so happy that you're joining me today. If you're new here, my name is Siena Anzaldua, and I am your horror expert here on Dead Air. Now, we love a good theme. We just got done with Black History Month, and now we're going into Women's Month. And let me tell you, there's some doozies in here. Some really great ones that I'm so excited to talk to you guys about. And today we're going over 2016's Raw by Julia DeCarno. And oh my God, I'm so excited. Oh my God, I'm very excited. So prepare yourself, because this movie is going to take horror to a very different level. That
level, the metaphysical level, the pataphysical level.
I don't think y'all are prepared for. So sit back, relax as much as you can, and let's get into our horror movie summary. We start out with lifelong vegetarian Justine. She begins her first semester at veterinary school, and it's the same one that her older sister Alexia is attending, and where their parents actually met. On her first night, she meets her roommate Adrian, who claims he's gay, and they are forced to partake in a week-long hazing ritual welcoming the new students. They're brought to a party where Alexia shows Justine old class photos of students bathed in blood, including one with their parents. The next morning, the new class is splattered with blood and is forced to eat raw rabbit kidneys. Ugh. Justine refuses because of her vegetarianism, but Alexia forces her to eat one.
Première fois que j'attends aussi longtemps un open bar.
C'est quoi?
Attends ton tour.
C'est de la viande?
C'est un rein de lapin, vaut mieux pas le savoir avant en général.
Mais le truc, c'est que moi, je suis végétarienne, je peux pas manger ça. Demande à ma sœur, on est tous végétariens dans la famille.
C'est qui ta sœur?
Alexia.
Ah ouais? Alex? Alex, viens 2 secondes.
Hein?
T'es végétarienne toi maintenant?
Bah non, pourquoi?
Et elle, c'est ta sœur?
Mais j'appelle mes parents si tu me crois pas.
T'es sérieuse là? C'est pas la mer à boire, franchement tout le monde y passe.
Bah t'as qu'à manger.
Justine leaves with Adrian and later discovers an itchy rash all over her body. She consults a doctor who diagnoses her with food poisoning and gives her cream for the rash. The next day, Justine begins having cravings for meat, which makes her feel ashamed. After a failed attempt to steal a burger from the cafeteria, she and Adrian take a late-night trip to a gas station so no one will see her eating meat. Unsatisfied, she eats raw chicken in the morning and later throws up a long bundle of her own hair she had been chewing on. That night, Alexia attempts to give her a bikini wax. But when Alexia tries to cut the wax off with sharp scissors, Justine kicks her away and Alexia accidentally cuts off her own finger.
Quoi? Qu'est-ce que t'as fait?
Alexia faints and Justine picks up the finger, tastes the blood, and starts eating it. Alexia wakes up to find Justine doing this, but later tells their parents that her dog, Quickie, ate it. The next morning, Alexia takes Justine to a deserted road where Alexia jumps in front of a car, causing the two people in it to crash into a tree. Alexia starts eating one of the passengers so that her sister will learn Justine is dismayed. Despite this, Justine's craving for human meat grows, and she starts lusting after Adrian. That night, she arrives at a party where paint is thrown at her as part of another hazing ritual, and she is forced to make out with a boy. While kissing, Justine bites the middle of his bottom lip off, leaving the other party guests shocked and disgusted. Justine returns to her dorm and takes a shower, where she picks a chunk of his lip out of her teeth and eats it.
Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Ah putain, elle est malade cette meuf!
Justine confides in Adrian and they end up having sex, during which Justine tries to bite Adrian, but instead bites her own arm until it bleeds profusely. At another party, Justine becomes extremely intoxicated and Alexia takes her to the morgue. The next day, everyone in school stares at Justine, some avoiding her. Adrian shows her a video where Justine is crawling on all fours, attempting to take a bite out of the arm of a corpse as Alexia eggs her on, to boos and cheers from a crowd of watching party guests. Justine confronts Alexia and fights her, eventually biting each other until they are pulled apart by other students. Justine helps Alexia up and they walk each other back to their dorms.
Quoi?
Chope, Justine, chope!
Dingue de merde.
Ça va?
The next morning, Justine wakes up in bed with Adrian and notices she's covered in blood. She pulls off the blankets, finding Adrian dead with most of his right leg eaten and a stab wound in his back. Justine then sees a bloody Alexia slumped on the floor. Justine is initially furious that Alexia killed Adrian, but then cleans Alexia and herself up in the shower. Alexia is imprisoned for the murder of Adrian, and Justine is sent back home. There, Justine's father tells her that what happened is neither hers nor Alexia's fault. He explains that when he first met their mother, he could not understand why she did not want to be with him. Her father says he finally realized when they kissed the first time, indicating a scar on his lip. He then opens his shirt, revealing scars and missing chunks of his chest, and assures Justine that she will find a solution.
m'a fait ramper au début. Elle arrêtait pas de me dire que j'étais son meilleur ami à l'école. Ça me rendait dingue. Et puis là, j'ai compris. Mais je suis sûr que toi, tu trouveras une solution, ma puce.
All right, so now, after that horrific horror summary, we're going over Siena's thoughts. We've got Siena's thoughts, whether you like them or not. We've got Siena's thoughts, Siena's thoughts. Okay, so my thoughts on this movie. There's a lot of them because, first of all, I think that this movie portrays this type of horror is so good and so creepy that when it comes to a zombie film is how I would sort of characterize this. It does it in such a realistic and natural way that it makes it really creepy because it gives it that realistic touch. I feel like this movie could actually happen in real life. And that's what makes a horror movie sometimes so good. So I loved the realistic aspect of this movie. I loved the... Honestly, there's not a lot of gore in this movie. But there are a few moments when it's like... It really makes you cringe when you watch this movie. Even though they're very far... I think there's only like 3 or 4 scenes in this movie that really show the gore in this movie, and I think that it does it in such a way that's so tasteful, so elegant, so beautiful, and I loved that aspect of this movie. I think there's a lot to love in this movie, and there's a lot of interpretations and a lot of different things to go over, but I feel like this is such a great horror / coming of age movie in a really twisted way, and I loved it. I loved the fact that, first of all, this is a French movie. So this is also our very first foreign film, which I think this is a great introduction. We'll go over many others that are as wonderful as this movie, I would say. I think that when it comes to horror movies, foreign horror movies, French, Japanese, all these different types of horror movies truly take on something much different than American movies can when it comes to horror. And so I believe that this gives us such a different take on horror and coming of age and what it means to be in a horror movie and just these different aspects of life that I don't think we necessarily understand as Americans, or sometimes we do. In this case, I mean, this is a very understandable sort of concept. Justine is going to college. At least she has her sister there, though, but it's sort of another transitional period that I think a lot of different people go through. So I loved this movie for that aspect. I loved this movie for the gore factor in that, because it's just, like I said before, it's so elegant. I loved the acting in this movie, because Justine and Alexia, you could tell that they're truly sisters. I loved that aspect of it. I loved their relationship together, because even when at the end, when Alexia is in jail, you can see Alexia puts her finger that Justine cut off to the glass, and Justine kisses it, and then Justine puts her cheek up to the mirror where Alexia bit into it, and Alexia kisses it. So you can still tell that they love one another. I love that aspect of this. I love many different aspects of this movie. So moving on from that, a lot of the different themes in this movie are really kind of intense when you look at them individually. So first we have the sexual awakening and the desire in this movie. So this film really uses the consumption of raw meat as a potential metaphor for developing the sexual urges, the hunger, all those types of things. And the protagonist, Justine, moves from being sort of that innocent, repressed state to embracing more of her animalistic desires. And you can tell that when she bites herself as her and Adrian are having sex. And I think that's really such an interesting concept, especially in a coming-of-age movie, which I would categorize this heavily, because you have all those coming-of-age tropes that are within a movie. So I loved that aspect of it. I think another big theme in this movie is, of course, the coming of age and identity. So Raw, we obviously follow Justine's transformation as she navigates leaving her parents' home and establishing her own identity, moving away from the idealized good girl sort of archetype. And we see this in a lot of different movies. Scream, for example, Neve Campbell, Sydney, we get that as well. So I do enjoy that aspect of this movie. You also get, like I said before, the body horror in this movie. So we see in the theme, though, this is a little bit different. Rather than seeing it physically, we see that in this film, Justine's body is rebelling against the mind. So it's highlighting the physical and often painful stages of like what can be construed as puberty and self-discovery and all these types of things. And I always like the fact that we get the, like when you get drunk, the real you or a lot of the repressed portions of you come out. And so I think we see that perfectly in this movie because you see Justine's animalistic side coming into fruition. And I did enjoy that part, and it gave it another level of creep and horror. So we have another really interesting aspect of this movie that I think is, again, always in a coming-of-age movie. But I think it's also within a lot of horror movies and a lot of horror tropes is the repression and the shame in this movie. So this narrative explores the consequences of when you hide your true nature, and specifically regarding the dangers of repressing your primal urges. So you can see this through Justine's actions, through Alexia's actions, through the parents' actions, and even through Adrian's actions, because you could tell that Adrian sort of has some sort of feelings towards Justine, and rather confronting that, he chooses to repress that. The parents are a big part of this movie, even though they're not in many different pieces of this movie. The pieces that they are in, you can tell that there's a trauma there as well, obviously, because so the parents didn't tell Justine about who she is at her core, about these primal urges wanting to eat humans. And obviously they didn't tell Alexia either. So these women both only discovered who they are when they went to college. The parents repressed that primal nature with the husband, with their dad, finding out that the mom attacked him and ate pieces of him. So I think that's a big consequence, and I think really interesting when it comes to this movie. You also get, obviously Justine trying to figure out who she is and repressing a lot of what she's feeling because it doesn't feel good, like it doesn't feel normal, and she's kind of freaking out about it. So I think those are all very interesting aspects. I think another aspect of this movie, another theme, is the sisterhood within Alexia and Justine's relationship. So you get the complexity between these two women, where Alexia is central, moving as a mentor for Justine, and you can tell there's a little bit of jealousy between the two sisters, which is interesting and gives it a little bit, like I said, a little bit more complexity to their relationship. So then we get the animalism and the humanity. So because this is set in a veterinary school, the film is able to blur the lines between human and animal, and it highlights the animalistic nature of humans. And I loved that. I love that sort of like that comparison between humans and animals. And I think it just, like I said, it gives another layer of complexity to this film to make it not only about the gore, about the horror of it, but also about what it means to be a human and how different people can interpret that. So we now have Siena's Music Mayhem segment. Siena's Music Mayhem segment. Siena's Music Mayhem segment. Siena's Music Mayhem segment. So yes, we are at Siena's Music Mayhem segment. Now, the score was made by Jim Williams, and this is sort of the backbone of this film's musical identity. It's really tense, it's odd, it's beautiful in a way that is really interesting. And it adds to this psychological the unsettling psychological factor of this movie. So Jim Williams is a British film and TV composer, and he's known for giving that sereneness and adding that eerie tension into it, which I think is so powerful. And actually, the score for this movie was nominated for Best Original Music at the César Awards. So I loved that. I love that this score is so minimal in a way, but it's also so incredibly powerful in combination with this movie. So we get the switch between this gentleness and the almost pastoral pieces, the pianos, the string instruments, and the intense organ heavy, pun intended, heavy horror dissonance. And it's like, it adds to that creep factor. So the original soundtrack actually has 28 tracks, and it includes the short thematic cues that are tied to the scenes, such as like the introduction, the bus crash, the finger eating scene, and the emotion-driven motifs. So like you get sort of this child musical sort of track as well. And of course, that's not to say that we also get sort of the bloodlust, intense, sort of heavy tracks in this movie that go with the different pieces of the more gory elements of this movie. So these cues really work like a soundtrack diary of Justine's psychological arc. So you get the cues of innocence, the weird, creepy self-awareness, and then the full-on horror in this movie. So the music is often feeling like a sort of second narrative that goes with Justine throughout her coming-of-age story. So we do get a few featured songs in this movie. So these songs hit a little harder because they land in very specific scenes. So the song Despair, Hangover, and Ecstasy by The Doe is a moody, almost trancey track used in the hazing party montage that feels like a rite of passage sort of area. So a lot of these different songs are going to emphasize these different scenes, which I think makes this score so powerful. So you also get Giddy Stratospheres by the Long Blondes, and this is a punchy indie track that adds that chaotic energy during one of the film's parties. Then we get Getting Boring by the Sea, which is by the Blood Red Shoes, a rock-infused track that contrasts with the score's dread, which gives it a more grounded, more youthful feel. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to butcher this, Mache Fredo Fa by Nada. And this is a vintage Italian pop song that adds a surreal nostalgia during the more quieter moments in this movie. So these songs aren't on the official score album, but they punctuate real-world moments in the movie like parties, mirrors, and the transformation points, giving the film a surprisingly eclectic soundtrack palette. And you can tell that when you watch this movie. It sort of feels trippy, but also sort of old-fashioned, and I think that really works well with this movie and to add to the intensity of this movie. So the Raw soundtrack is really much smarter than just horror music, because the score does this really cool thing where it feels like an emotional map of Justine's descent. It's sort of peaceful, then unsettling, and then full on body horror sort of areas without ever overpowering the visual. So it really works in tandem perfectly with this movie. And I think it just adds the horror, and it emphasizes the horror in such a wonderful, wonderful way. So for our second to last segment, we have Siena's Fun Facts. They're fun and they're facts where you learn a little something. Siena's Fun Facts. Yes, we have Siena's Fun Facts. Fun fact number 1. So the director actually made the cast watch horror movies together before filming, not necessarily to prep them mentally, but to get them more comfortable with each other's bodies and create an almost intimate familiarity that translates into the film's raw physicality. So having them watch these different horror movies, not specifically to understand the horror genre, but to get that intimacy between them is really interesting, because if you watch this movie, there's a lot of different intimate scenes, and that's not necessarily saying that it's sexual, but it's more very intense, very close together, very intimate. So I think that this really adds to the movie in that way. Fun fact number 2. So going on to the music again, Justine's shift from vegetarianism to craving raw meat is mirrored in the soundtrack in a very trippy sort of way. So composer Jim Williams changes her theme from acoustic guitar to electric and organ, where she first tastes flesh, pun intended. So this turns the benign melody into something gothic and very unsettling, and it emphasizes that throughout the movie. Love that. Fun fact number 4. Fun fact number 3. So the film actually started as an artistic experiment where it sort of challenged the audiences to see if they could empathize with a character we'd normally call a monster. So DeCarlo wanted us to feel Justine's transformation and sort of empathize with that transformation rather than just writing her off as a monster. I love that, because I think that is what we do. We feel bad for Justine because she is repressed in so many different ways and by so many different people that I think a lot of us can truly empathize with that. Fun fact number 4. So audiences didn't just react mentally, they physically reacted as well when seeing this movie. At early festival screenings, people reported fainting, vomiting, or walking out because of the intensity. So much so that the film gained a reputation as a body horror experience you feel in your gut. So I think that's kind of interesting. I'm always curious as to whether people actually like do that at, film screenings or whatever. But I mean, with this movie, it is pretty intense. So I don't know. It's possible that people actually fainted and vomited and such, but I think this is one of those movies that could probably do that. Last but certainly not least, we have Scarometer, that meters as you get scared. Scarometer, that meters as you get scared. Yes. Today's Scarometer, for I don't know how many times in a row, probably 3 times in a row, 10 out of 10. I loved this movie. I think it did something very different with horror that I think is not really seen that hasn't really been seen in recent years. I think it takes horror to a very different level, such a much more psychological level that I love, and it didn't rely on the gore, but rather the gore emphasized what the movie is trying to tell us as an audience, as watchers watching this movie. And so I love this movie for that reason. I loved the many different themes, the many different aspects of horror, of coming of age during college for a woman. I think this is such a perfect movie to start out Women's History Month. So I love that. And just prepare yourself. We're going to take quite a turn in our next movie. So thank you all for joining me today. I hope you watch this movie. I hope you enjoy this movie, and I hope that you love it as much as I do. Don't forget to sort of sound off and let me know what you guys think about this movie on my Instagram as well. So thank you so much for joining me. Have a great night, people. That wraps up our journey through Raw. A film that takes transformation, identity, and body horror and gives it such a quiet, unsettling, and deeply uncomfortable feel in a slow burn and psychological way. Next episode, we are drastically switching lanes. We're going from art house horror to cult chaos with Leprechaun. And, my father's request, Leprechaun in the Hood. 2 films that fully abandon subtlety and lean straight into camp, chaos, and pure horror comedy energy. Different vibes, same madness, zero emotional whiplash. Okay, maybe a little. So get ready for gold, gore, and a whole lot of unhinged energy. And remember, folks, don't split up and don't go into the basement. Bye.